Hey there, are you still wondering and have questions about using Y-DNA as part of your genealogy research? Well, I've got some answers for you because today in this video, I am sharing with you a previous live stream done by Mary Eberle just for Are You My Cousin followers on using Y-DNA as part of your genealogy research. Now, if you missed part one, not a problem. You can hit pause and head back over to watch the first part of this particular live stream. I've got the link down below, but you can also start here and then go back when you're done. Either one is perfectly fine. Now, if you are new to Are You My Cousin and we are just meeting, I am Lisa Listen with Are You My Cousin, and this YouTube channel is designed to help you find your ancestors, grow your family tree, but not get overwhelmed in the process. So, all right, let's talk Y-DNA part 2, and let's join Mary.
Well, thanks everybody for being here. And like we said, if you missed part 1, Lisa will link to that in the comments. And this is part 2. We're going to talk about some recent improvements that family tree DNA has come up with, along with the big Y DNA test. So there just wasn't enough time last time we met to do that. And these improvements actually came out right around the time we talked last time. So right now, if you'd like to order a Y-DNA test from Family Tree DNA, you can start out with a Y37 test, where they'll look at 37 markers. You can also do the Y111 test, where they look at 111 markers. And then there is the big Y700. And that is the biggest test they offer. I'm going to be using a client's Y-DNA results to help explain the new features and to talk about the big Y test. So this person is T. Cox, and his sister asked me to work on his Y-DNA results. And actually, we also worked with his autosomal DNA and her autosomal DNA because she was trying to determine where their Cox ancestors came from. They believed that it was someplace in Ireland. We discussed the fact that Cox, you would think of as an English name, so maybe in the past, before that family resided in Ireland, they were from England. And we also talked about how so many Irish people have that question about where did my Irish ancestors come from? And in particular, if your Irish ancestors came from Ireland during the potato famine, there just aren't a lot of good resources to figure out where they came from. So luckily, she had tested her brother's Y-DNA, and her brother is T. Cox up here in the right-hand corner. And initially at the 111 level, so this is where 111 markers are tested, he had these two matches that were very close. I'm calling them F. Cox and J. Cox. F. Cox matches T. Cox, except for 2 out of the 111 markers. So sometimes this is called genetic distance, that there's a genetic distance of 2 or 2 steps, and that just means that they match at all but those 2. And he said that his paternal country of origin was Ireland, and then he listed his earliest known paternal ancestor, and that should be his earliest known patrilineal ancestor. So his father's father's father was Mr. Thomas Cox, born in 1840. And he had a little more information about that. So there's that one. And then there's J. Cox, who at the 111 level had a genetic distance of 4. And based on that, one would think that this person, F. Cox, is a closer match. And that means that their most recent common ancestor would be closer in time than this one. One thing I'm highlighting here is that the Y haplogroup is listed for each man. So this one is an IFT 246, 845, and this one is different at IFT 245, 250. So just keep this one in mind. Well, actually both of them. And the second, J. Cox, he also says my family comes from Ireland and that my father's father's father, the oldest one I know, is Patrick Cox, born in 1856 in Ireland. So this is consistent with the family story that the Coxes came from Ireland, but, and they both had trees. And actually, this one had more information about their Irish origins, which is always nice to have what looks like your closest match have some good information that you don't have. One of the new features that FTDNA just put out is that they have a new tip calculator. And tip is a time predictor. And this is given to you if you've done the Y37, the Y67, the Y111 test. And it updates their age estimation algorithms. And it's supposed to be more accurate than before in predicting the generations to get to your most recent common ancestor. So if all you've done is a Y111 test or fewer, so for example, my brother did the Y67 back when that was available, then I think it's good to check out this new tip tool. Let's start out with T. Cox's closest match. So this is F. Cox with a genetic distance of 2 steps. And this is where that new tip calculator is. So it even says new underneath it. And if you click on it, for this person, you get this table. And if we look at the Y111, and we go down to the 2 for genetic distance, we're looking at an estimate for their most recent common ancestor to be roughly 800 CE. And they give you a range. And if you click on that, right, that there's a link right there, you'll get this table, or this table and this graph. And this says for T. Cox, the brother, and F. Cox, the person that appears to be the closest match, that on average, you would find the common ancestor in the year 1796. So this, that doesn't sound too bad. We might be able to go to the records, probably the church records in Ireland, and possibly go back that far in time to try to find their most recent common ancestor. Let's look at the other person who has a genetic distance of 4, and that is J. Cox. Here's the genetic distance of 4. And then if we click on this new button, we get this table. And under the Y111 column, if we go down to the row that shows a genetic distance of 4, it says that their most recent common ancestor should be about the year 1700. And if we click on this, we get a similar graph and table, and it says that on average, the most recent common ancestor would be in 1706. And that's, I think, going to be a lot tougher to do. You'd probably have to go back 4 more generations than for the other match. But, it gives you a good idea of whether it's worthwhile to research and try to find your common ancestor. So that is what this new tip calculator does. If you're familiar with the old one, it gave you a table and it said how many generations to your common ancestor, and then it gave you a percent. There's a 50% chance that it's going to be in 4 generations. There's a 75% chance it's going to be in 8, and so on. So this is a lot more information, and it's a lot more accurate, and it's not talking in terms of generations. It's telling you that the year that the person was born. So this is a much more detailed and accurate prediction. So that is their tool. And now I'm going to shift gears and talk about the Big Y test. And this used to be called the Big Y 500 test, but now they've increased the number of markers that they're looking at. So now it's called the Big Y 700 test. And they have included expanded coverage for both Y STRs and Y SNPs. So just a reminder that Y DNA has 2 different kinds of mutations. So therefore, there are 2 different kinds of Y DNA tests that are offered at Family Tree DNA. The SNP stands for single nucleotide polymorphism. It's where just one single letter in your DNA code is different than the rest of the population. So historically, these SNPs were used to give you your Y DNA haplogroup. STRs are different because it's a different kind of mutation. It's these short tandem repeats. So for example, it might be a triplet of letters. So let's say GAG. And one man at the specific location on the Y chromosome might have 10 of these repeats. And then his sons will typically also have that 10. But maybe his great-great-great-grandchildren might have 11. So there would be these minor changes over the generations. But if you compared that man to some random man on the street, that random man on the street might have 15 repeats at this specific location for that specific GAG unit. So those historically, the STR markers, were used to determine your haplotype. When you ordered a Y37 test, that meant that you got 37 STR markers tested. If you ordered a 111, then you got 111 of these STR markers tested. So now with the Big Y 700 test, Family Tree DNA is including significantly more SNP test as well as STR test. And when you add in all of those additional tests, you're going to get a finer and finer description of what your Y DNA is. So the same thing back when we compared like Y37 to Y111, where there's not a huge amount of difference. With the 111, you would get a finer definition and be able to see closer matches. But here, it's gone way beyond that to find extremely close matches. One of the most important parts of this Big Y test is called the block tree. And you get to that under results, big Y, and block tree. And this has been around for some time. They have added features to it though. So this is the block tree for T. Cox. So that is the brother. He is placed in this branch along with one of his Y DNA matches, his Y111 matches, J. Cox. Over here in this next branch of the tree is F. Cox. And if you remember back to what was going on in their Y111 comparisons, there, F. Cox was said to be the closer match because there was a genetic distance of only 2 for this person and a genetic distance of 4 for this person. When I first saw this, I was really surprised that now all of a sudden J. Cox was significantly closer to the brother than it was F. Cox. I have talked to people who specialize in Y DNA, and they have told me that this isn't that unusual, that family tree DNA is now learning based on all of the testing. So they've added all of these new markers. They've tested so many more people. They've tested ancient samples for their Y DNA, and they've been able to really define these haplogroups much more finely than what they did in the past, meaning, sure, on the Y111 test, this guy was closer, but now that we have basically a stronger microscope to look at more detail, we now realize that actually this one, J. Cox, is closer. And I captured this next group just because they're also Coxes, but they are even further back in time. So on this block tree, we see the IFT 245250. That's the haplogroup of the brother, and also his match, J. Cox. And then over here, F. Cox is a different haplogroup. So, and remember, we saw this back on the 111 table that had the matches, and I had highlighted that J. Cox had this haplogroup. But going on to F. Cox, he is a slightly different number, and the common ancestor between this group and that group is further back in time. It's back up here at the very top. All right. This was an announcement about a month ago saying that they have a group time tree from FTDNA, that it's a new Big Y tool for family tree DNA group projects. And I'll show you some screenshots of this discover feature. And it can be used even if you haven't done Y DNA testing at family tree DNA. So let's say you did a test at 23andMe. If you have a Y chromosome, they will tell you your haplogroup. And you can plug that into this discover feature. Okay, so just as a reminder, the brother, T. Cox, he is this haplogroup. So it ends in 250. And the haplotree, which was talked about in that previous slide, it shows all of the subtypes that are known. So I clicked on I because this is an I haplogroup, and I put in the full haplogroup, And it shows it down here at the bottom. We've got other branches. So this is the branch that other match is in. And then some more distantly related branches and where they are attributing their patrilineal line to. So we've got all these are Ireland. This one is England, which is interesting because, as I mentioned, that Cox surname I think of as being English. Okay, so that's the haplotree that all of this DNA testing, so those three men, the brother and the two matches, all did the big Y. And these haplogroups are coming from the big Y test. Okay, so back to that Discover tool. If you type in your haplogroup here, and as I mentioned, you might have your haplogroup from your 23andMe test. I believe Living DNA also gives you that. Or if you've tested at Family Tree DNA, you'll have that. You type it in here and press search. And it comes out with this time tree. And the time tree shows the brother's haplogroup down here, as well as his match's haplogroup. And that this haplogroup broke off of the earlier one, meaning there were enough mutations in it to be considered a unique haplogroup back in 1650 CE. So this is the parent haplogroup, and that's what F. Cox has. And remember, he was the closer Y111 match. So this now gives you a time frame, and this is going to be much more accurate than even the new tip calculator, because I went through and looked at that, and that actually reported that the opposite man was closer. So the most recent common ancestor between T. Cox, the brother, and F. Cox, meaning this match, is about 1600 or 1650 CE. And from a genealogical point of view, what's important is that this supports T. Cox working with J. Cox, this guy, to find their most recent common ancestor and their common Irish location. So where did their ancestors come from within Ireland? And if we were just relying on the 111, I would have told my client, the sister, look at F. Cox, and let's look at his tree. Let's look at the cities in Ireland that he believes his Irish ancestors came from. And now, after looking at the big Y results, it is going to be more effective to work with this J. Cox. And, that's not to say everybody shouldn't help everybody, but when you're looking at trees and maybe looking at the records in Salt Lake City, then I would be looking at, your own records and this man's records to see if you can come up with the common ancestor to both lines. So this is really interesting that all of a sudden we've got kind of our focus is really shifted to this other match. This is just the bottom part of this tree. So I took a screenshot of this and what's beneath it. And this is the brother's haplogroup. And it occurred about 1650. And FTDNA is saying that there are two people in this group, meaning the one T. Cox and J. Cox. Okay. And that So they're down here in that 250 group. And then this is the parent haplogroup, meaning this haplogroup arose from this one. And this is where that other match is. And it's giving you this information in a slightly different view, in a timeline. So in summary, we have this new improved tip calculator if you tested Y111 or fewer markers. We also have the block tree, and that's very helpful at estimating the time to the most recent common ancestor. And then this even newer feature, which is the Discover tool, it gives you that age estimate of the time to the most recent common ancestor. And that includes the time tree, which gives you a time-based view of the haplogroups. So this part of it. So FTDNA has done a lot of, they've got blog posts about this, and there's actually a Facebook group focused on the big Y that you can join if you have more questions about this and want to kind of read through and follow people's questions.
Thank you so much, Mary, for coming. I'm excited that you joined. This is really helpful. This is very helpful to me, especially too. I'm like, okay, yeah, I have a few new ideas now that I want to maybe test out. So it's always good to get new theories, definitely. So I appreciate you doing that. I hope you found that as enlightening as I did. Mary has such a great way of sharing her knowledge of using DNA in general, but certainly in this case, using the Y-DNA as part of our genealogy research. I'm feeling a lot more confident with it myself and looking forward to exploring some of the concepts that she shared with us in these 2 videos that she has talked about Y-DNA with us. Now, if you missed the part 1, watch that video on your screen now, because you can go back and catch all the goodness from part 1, Y-DNA, in that video.